Welcome to the stage, the representative for Jim Soyer. Jim Soyer dedicated over 4 decades to public service in South Dakota, quietly shaping policy and improving lives without seeking the spotlight. Known for his integrity, humility, and unwavering loyalty, Soyer served as a trusted advisor, chief of staff, press secretary, and legislative director to prominent leaders. He brought a working-class perspective to state government, proudly listing his early roles, such as truck driver, teacher, newspaperman, before his political titles. Soyer's legacy includes bringing Citibank to South Dakota and advancing critical programs like the Internet Crimes Against Children and Amber Alert system. A brilliant communicator and mentor to generations, he is remembered not only for his policy impact, but also for leading with principle, humility, and deep respect for the people of South Dakota.
All the way over here, I wouldn't have to go first. I'm still trying to recover from learning that Jack Marsh was good friends with the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. I assume that was off the record. Both gentlemen are high quality. Lonnie, thank you for this honor. And I would like to ask you and the family, Jim Soyer family, to stand up and receive the thanks of the people that have gathered here. Jim Soyer often said to governors that he served, and I quote, "Normal people don't have lobbyists. It's our job to watch out for them." So it's someplace between ironic and awkward that this acceptance speech, induction speech, is being delivered by a career lobbyist. It may help that I retired a month ago, but I'd also point out the chamber honored the work of Jim Soyer at their last annual meeting. Before there was a cloud storing all of the information of mankind, it was stored in Jim Sawyer's head. All contained in a physical specimen Terry Wooster said could be described by children as Santa Claus's brother. Jim Soyer was a self-described truck driver, teacher, newspaperman who always thought the private sector was to be admired as a place where normal people worked. He started public service as a spokesman for Bill Janklow, and that alone qualifies him for membership in the South Dakota Hall of Fame. Long before PowerPoint, Jim Soyer developed huge charts for State of the State and budget addresses. Jim wrote all or part of government addresses than anyone else has or ever will again. He was chief of staff or key advisor to at least 6 governors, including Tommy Thompson in Wisconsin. He coined the term bleeders for bills that spent money, and it was used especially when governors didn't like what the money was being spent on. We at the chamber had a number of bills that we thought were investments. Jim disagreed. We got labeled bleeders, and we lost. Jim knew the pulse of the people. He loved politics. We worked together on several statewide ballot measures. One in particular, it was a campaign where we didn't have much money. Actually, that describes every damn ballot measure I ever worked on. We were discussing what media to buy, Steve Willard, Jim Soyer, and I, and the media team, and Jim insisted we buy radio. We thought he was nuts. We wanted to buy TV, but we were broke. We looked at Jim and said, why on earth would we buy radio? And he reminded us, especially in the fall, there was thousands and thousands of farmers sitting on tractors and in combines doing nothing but listen to the radio. We bought radio. We won. Lieutenant Governor Matt Michaels called me into his office one day, and on his conference table was endless sheets of paper taped together to form the biggest spreadsheet in the history of mankind. On that spreadsheet was every school district and every fact about every school district that you could imagine. Opt-outs, levies, reserves of school districts that had a whole year's budget sitting in reserve. I think he had every teacher's average height and shoe size. I looked at it. Lieutenant Governor was very excited. And I said, "This is great. Why am I here?" And he said, "You know, you're one of a handful of people that wouldn't think this was boring and would think it's interesting. And half of you would understand it." And I said, "Which half do I belong to?" He put his hand on my back and pushed me towards the door and said, "Don't get greedy, son." Jim Soyer had a direct impact on developments that you heard on the tape: Citibank, Homestake Labs, state aid formula with a 30% tax reduction in property taxes, wiring the schools, and the state centennial celebration. If you don't know the significance of those things, may I suggest you're at the wrong dinner. Jim Soyer simultaneously became a husband and father. He gave both everything he had. I have been given the privilege of being introduced to Jim Soyer in the role of father and in the role of husband, and I learned his heart was as big as his brain. He wrote a 10-page letter on the joy and responsibility of being a parent. Can you imagine a 10-page letter from Jim Soyer that didn't have a single spreadsheet in it? Jim Soyer said his life work was, and I quote, "to gather, organize, boil down accurate and relevant information so leaders could make the best decisions possible." Jim Soyer succeeded in that life's work. Jim Soyer has arrived where he belongs, in the South Dakota Hall of Fame.